Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Allan, welcome to Lawyers Who Learn. It's been a hot second since me and you had a chance to catch up. And I said, well, if we're going to catch up about what's going on in your world as a lawyer and an individual, let's do it on a podcast. So thanks for taking the leap of faith with me.
My pleasure, David. Great to see you again.
So just to level set, Allan, can you just give a sense of how big your firm is? Now you were set up, the camera was perfect. Why did you move
was it? Sorry. I thought my head was escaping out the top.
You're good. Give us a sense of your how big your firm is, just to get a sense of where you're at in terms of what type of law you're doing and in terms of your leadership journey.
Yeah, I mean, the firm was started by me in 2007, so we're coming up to about 18 years. Amazingly, I don't know where that time has gone, to be honest. And yeah, we're a general business law firm. As you're aware, we get a lot of international cross-border kind of market entrant clients from Western Europe, mostly UK, Ireland, some Australian, that kind of thing. We do a lot of M&A, and we do a lot of stuff for purely domestic US clients as well. We're New York centered. I'd say 75% of us are in the New York area, tri-state.
How many attorneys in your firm?
Probably about a dozen or so.
How many total staff?
Yeah, well, I'd say we've got 3 or 4 support staff as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. That's helpful. The program is called Lawyers Who Learn. And the concept is, while CLE is very important and it's part of what every attorney needs to do as part of their practice, maybe 98% of learning happens outside of a CLE course in terms of leadership and running a firm and all that.
And it's so much that you don't get in law school either. It's not just CLE, right? We've got and a number of times I've been invited along to talk at Fordham and New York Law School, and I really enjoy doing that because they're asking me about the business of law and how do you build a practice? How does sales work in law, right? It's a dirty word in law, but ultimately it's a sales business and a relationship business. And I really enjoy kind of talking about those things because, when you start a firm, you're kind of thrust into having to do those things. And I've probably made every mistake there is to make in running a law firm. But, you do learn along the way, and you good mentors and just having a friend network and peers that you can reach out to, these are all parts of it.
So you've spoken a lot about this. Let me flip it a little bit. What is something that you wish you spoke on more that you never get asked about that really is more interesting to you about the practice of law or about your journey?
Well, I think I mentioned those instances, but they are quite rare. What I usually am on the phone talking about or doing presentations on or Zoom or whatever is talking to some company from the UK about their journey into the US and what the legal aspects and how can we support. And I enjoy that, and I can candidly do that in my sleep, that conversation, because I've been doing it for years. We've helped 300 companies set up in the US or something like that in 20 years. So I would like to get out there more on the marketing and of law and business of law and how that works. Just because I enjoy it, frankly. I don't know if it would be helpful to us as a practice, but it is an interesting area that I think, unfortunately, a lot of lawyers struggle with. I don't think law schools don't tend to mint the sorts of people that are necessarily sales oriented or want to do things like BD, which again, they feel uncomfortable about it, but it's a fact of life.
So that's interesting because it's so funny when you talk about that you've helped 300 companies or firms come to the US. That's a significant number. First, do you think that's an exaggeration? You're literally thinking
no, it's around there, plus or minus 10. We did the
These are law firms or companies as a whole?
It's all sorts of businesses, right?
So, is there people through your network, or how did they get in touch with you? And are you getting paid for this, or this is you just helping people out?
No, this is okay. So our practice, I'd say, is about 50% UK, meaning it's UK headquartered businesses, and we're supporting their American law needs, right? Now, so when I meet one of these, whether it's the British government introduces me, or Enterprise Ireland, or one of the trade groups like Oz Trade, or it's more often than not now it's client to client. Client says, hey, you set up in America, who should I talk to about that? Like, you should call this Allan Rooney guy. So then you have obviously you have an introductory Zoom, not dissimilar to this, and you go through all the issues. And I think when they recognize that we've done 300 of these sorts of projects, that we know what we're doing, and usually we come over fairly well in those conversations. And fortunately, they quite often hire us to support them on their US legal, right?
Got it. I missed that. So you meant that you're being hired as a law firm to help companies move from the UK to the US and set up the proper legal structures and other things that they need to do.
Exactly. Very employment, IP, tax, equity comp, might be some M&A is a big part of what we do, and it's not, some of it's just organic, set up a subsidiary, try and hire and grow. They might have venture capital money, they might not.
I watched your podcast interview with Joe Applebaum from 7 years ago.
Oh, wow. You sneaky lad doing your research.
And you talked about coming from the UK and it was like a big step and you felt like a fish out of water here. And it just, I don't like to ever ask questions that I've already know the answer to, but I actually don't know the answer to this because you didn't talk about it. Why did you move here initially? And that's let's talk about that because I know it's something you talk about, but it is a big leap of faith to do something like that and start a new firm.
No question. So between me moving here and me starting a firm, there was probably a decade of being in the US. I initially, really the genesis of coming was when I was studying at Edinburgh University in Scotland, they had a number of junior year abroad programs effectively, right? And one of them was going to University of Texas in Austin. And I just thought that sounded really interesting and exciting. So I was actually, depending on how you've done in your first 2 years of your classes in law school. So the UK system, England's English degree is 3 years undergrad, Scottish system is 4 years undergrad, right? So that's a lot of the reason that the US has a 4-year liberal art model. Because I think now parents are looking at St Andrews, Edinburgh, like, oh, it's just like our system. It's like, actually, no. Princeton was set up by these ministers who came from Scotland 150, 200 years ago. And that's why it's a very similar system. Interesting.
Fascinating. That's fascinating.
And Scotland's always been very big on education. It's always been a big thing in the culture. And even when we got together with England, they demarcated certain types of things that would be different in Scotland, and it was the church would stay independent, the legal system would stay independent, and the education system would be independent. So it didn't subsume itself into England in the way that it approaches these things. But that's story for another time, right? History lessons. But so I had this 3rd year abroad opportunity, and I'd done my first 2 years. And I was a really good student in high school. I'm sure this has happened to a lot of us, right? Like A's down the line. I kind of had my pick college-wise. So I was fortunate. And then I get to law school and I'm bang average, right? Because like there's so many bright kids there. And I
the most common story that I hear.
Yeah. And candidly, I didn't enjoy the study of law. I didn't find the teaching compelling. I guess I didn't really get it. And I was young and possibly a bit immature. And, so I'm sitting there, but I'm thinking this go to Texas thing would be amazing. And unfortunately, there were 3 slots available and there was 3 people in there and I was 4th because my academics were just kind of like, eh. And I'm like, oh man, I really want to go there. And then so I just call up Texas University randomly from Scotland. And this is probably early 1997. And I speak to a professor there somehow, and she's like, who is this guy with the big accent talking to me? Like, and I'm like, well, look, I noticed that usually we do 3 each year, right? But 2 years ago, I know that Pete came out on his own. So that's kind of 2 slots you've never had to fill. So I'm just wondering if you would be open to it. I'd love to come along, and it would be 4 instead of 3. And I understand that's not the normal allotment. And she's sort of like, well, let me get back to you. I'll talk to some people, blah, 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 blah. And I get an email about a week or 2 later to my director of studies, which is kind of like your guidance person, I guess, in the US context. If Mr. Rooney is as tenacious in his studies as he is in trying to enter the University of Texas, he'll be a credit to our law school, right? And that was I just kind of pushed my way in, to be honest.
Holy smokes!
Right?
Is that a theme that you have done? Well, parking lot that, but I would love to hear if that was a one-time thing that you look back on, or if you can see over the past 15 plus years since then, other stories like that where you change the course of your career and your life and your practice?
Yeah, no question. That's a big sliding doors moment. If you remember the movie, right? Like, and
What
it
movie?
was Sliding Doors. Never seen it? The subway. It's London. It's in London. The doors open, the doors close. Right? He walks in and he meets the girl, or he doesn't meet the girl, and that's the premise of it. John Hannah's in the movie. It's very good. It's a good movie. Anyway,
that might be the theme of this podcast.
I don't know, sliding doors, but that sense of persistence is definitely a constant with me, right? It's kind of a hustle thing, right? And I don't know if you can teach it, you're born with it or what. So I grew up kind of middle class in Scotland. I wasn't from the ghetto at all, but we didn't really have a hell of a lot. My dad was a teacher, my mom didn't work. I do think some of my drive came from, my dad going, oh, we can't afford that, or, got used cars, a decent house, and I was always like, I wish I didn't have to worry about what things cost, that sucks. So there's a little bit of that. And then you get to America, and my God, like, I think to use an EOism, and we can explain what that is, you can't read the label when you're in the jar, right? You come to the US as an outsider, and you're like, holy crap, this place is amazing. Like, look at the opportunity here. And the biggest defining quality of this country, I think, and leaving aside all the stuff that's going on right now, is positivity, right? It's just the ability for Americans to say, we can do this, we can build this, it can be done. And that entrepreneurial spirit, or that, I guess, originally pioneering culture, whatever it was. I'm watching actually Yellowstone in 1893 right now. But it's just remarkable. And then I was back in Edinburgh for a year, dying to get a job in New York, sent a million letters and resumes via snail mail, as we did back in the day. Rejection, I could fill a cabinet with rejection letters, right? And luckily, I found an internship program that would take me for a year. And I did that partly just to get here so I could kind of knock on doors and try and see if I could make.
This is after law school?
After law school. Remember, I've done 4 years of undergraduate law school, which again is a bit weird in the US context. You're trying to get jobs with a kind of weird background. I think now, at least in the Northeast, the likes of St. Andrews, Edinburgh are a bit better known than they were 25 years ago. So it was 25 years ago in September past, I came to New York, 99, and managed to jump from that to another job. But that first job at Deloitte, the only reason, and I was about to give up, dude. I was living in Jersey City in a basement with my soccer buddies, and they had like the rooms, and I was paying something for this tiny basement thing. And I was hanging my clothes on like the pipes, or the heating pipes, And I'm like, my dad's like, come home, this is a joke. You could get a job in London. Why are you doing this? And I'm like, I don't want to give up. And I went bizarrely to watch my favorite soccer team play another team, but it was like VHS. It was a Monday because I'd missed it on the weekend. And I went up to the pub where they had the supporters club was based. And I'm like, you got the game on? And the guy's like, yeah. Here. And he's celebrating with me because he's also a fan and watching it for the 6th time. And I'm just watching it. And he's like giving me pints because he's from Scotland like me, and he's not even charging me. And I'm like, here's my story. I tell him my story. And he goes like, you know what? You should email these Deloitte people that come in here and drink. And because they're really nice, and I think they have some lawyers in their group. So I'm like, well, what the hell, right? And again, I'm probably a week or two from giving up and leaving. And this is not uncommon for expats coming in and visa matters. Like a lot of people struggle to sort that out and end up leaving, that I would argue are very valuable people to have in the country. Let's leave that debate to one side. But I think I got this job at Deloitte. They did my H-1B visa. Did that for a couple of years. I knew I wouldn't love it. It was international tax, but it was actually quite a really useful backgrounding. And then 9/11 happened. And there was that kind of basically recession in New York City that you'll remember. And was kind of at Deloitte for a bit longer. No disrespect to Deloitte. I learned a lot. There's some good people there. Wasn't really for me. It was a very big institutional place, right? And frankly, I was junior and I thought I was real smart, but I didn't really know what I was doing, So I think in some ways it was partly me and maturity too. Then I got out to a boutique and had a great time because the guy sent me to court all the time. I had no idea what I was doing, and I just had to kind of figure it out. And he dropped me in the ocean. And I had to swim, right? And that was. And I'll stop there because I'm about to tell my whole life story.
No, this is fascinating.
But it was
just to continue. It just thought it's okay, but like try, like, you can talk a little bit get us to today. Can you, because I just want to finish it maybe in a minute, like get us from there to today from that
I can
job.
do that. I can do that. And I'm just being totally candid. I worked for this boutique. They were doing a lot of litigation and various stuff. They weren't paying me much. I'd taken a pay cut to get out of the big place because I wasn't really into it. But I was learning a lot and I was enjoying it. And they said, look, if you start to bring in clients, we'll give you a percentage, which is fairly common in smaller law firms. And I was like, okay, so I started going out and trying to make that happen, built up some business doing that over 2 or 3 years. Not that easy in your mid to late 20s to be a rainmaker in law, as you know. But they basically, at that point, I was supposed to get a green card through them. For various reasons, that didn't happen. I'll go into it with you over a beer. And I was like, what am I going to do? So meanwhile, me and my buddy Matt had bought a brownstone in Jersey City in '05. The eternal entrepreneurs that we are, right, Dave? And we renovated that into condos. And in '07, we flipped the condos and we did pretty well on it. And for the first time in my life, I was kind of liquid, had some money in the bank. I was like, well, that went well. The law visa is not going so well. I'm going to have to leave, go back to London. Another time where I was like, they're throwing me out again, right? And I basically, a friend said, why don't you take some of the money from the condos, set up a law firm and do an e-visa, which is a British investor visa in the US. So the genesis of the law firm founding was actually an immigration issue I had, and I wanted to stay in New York. And I didn't have enough clients. I didn't have enough anything, but I did it. And then that was the ultimate fire under my you-know-what. So from there, I had to make it happen.
You know, there's a lot of this going on right now about Americans looking to get visas in Europe. And like, I was just, like I said, in Barcelona last week. I used to live there, as you know.
Yeah.
And I was talking to several people who are getting citizenship, let's say in Portugal. And one of the ways you can get citizenship in Portugal is either you buy real estate or you invest in like a private equity firm, a couple $100,000 and over a certain course of time. And so what I'm hearing what you said is at that time, if you were able to invest in a company, I guess, you were able to eventually become a citizen.
Well, what's ironic is I survived with this e-visa, which I'd never heard of, but now we do them all the time for clients. So the US has treaties with various countries, most of them Western countries, where actually that's not entirely true, but there's various e-treaties, and basically the premise is you're going to invest in America, you're going to hire Americans, you're going to have a business plan, tax revenue will come as a result, blah blah blah. That's the e-visa structure. Yeah.
Is that still exists today?
Absolutely.
How long did it take for you from an e-visa to become a citizen?
Well, that's a funny story because about a month into having my own firm, I'm obviously networking all the time, right? Going out to cocktail parties and lunches and whatever. I was no stranger to the double lunch. I'd have the 12 o'clock lunch, eat a salad, have the 1:30 lunch late with someone else. And you know, doing sales how it is. And I went to an event at a law firm, click on the door. Walking up to the door is this beautiful Latin-looking woman who's quite tall. And I'm thinking, Brazilian or something like that? I don't know. And she opens the door and she's like, the event's kind of over. It's like a cocktail drinks and some partner at the big firm had invited me. I was like, no, I have to go say hi to Bill. I just have to. Sorry, I know I'm a little late. So she's like, the guacamole's kind of black. I don't know why you're coming in. You should probably just go home. And I'm like, no. And I'm, again, a bit of persistence is happening, right? Go say hi to Bill, blah, 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 blah. Everyone goes out for drinks or something after. And I get her business card, follow up email, let's have lunch. 15 years, 16 years later, we're married with 4 boys. And we kind of fell in love, you know, in 2007, 2008, just then. And I had this visa, right? But it was a bit dodgy. It wasn't like the most convincing e-visa in the world. So Christina and I went down to City Hall in the Christmas of '08, and that simplified the green card process, shall we say.
Well, so she wasn't Brazilian then.
She was Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican.
Yeah, from Brooklyn.
Wow.
Very much a Brooklyn gal.
So just amazingly, you're saying in your persistence for business and to further practice, you met your wife, who was trying to hold you back in the networking.
Or just trying to survive, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And okay, so this is fascinating. So you you started the firm. What year was this when you were trying to get the e-visa?
I started on June 11th, 2007. I'll never forget,
Okay.
because that's
Right
when
before the
salary,
market fully crashed.
which was, I was actually out about 12 months before that, which I think helped.
Okay.
Um,
Right. For sure. Okay. So
yeah.
12 months before that, and you have a really big incentive because not only do you trying to grow a firm, you want to stay in the United States, and you have to have a firm that's growing and bringing in income for that to happen.
Yeah, and I need money to live on, you know, I think my goal that year was to do like 150 grand and just like tread water, be able to pay my rent. And luckily, you know, I didn't have kids, I didn't have a mortgage, and you know, I'd gotten rid of the real estate. But I think we broke $1 million the first year, right? So that was like,
Okay.
that
Hold the
started,
phone. Hold
yeah.
the phones. How did you break $1 million your first year as a lawyer?
I mean, I'm talking like gross billings, you know, a bit of luck, a bit of being persistent and hustling and being good at
What
it.
was your number? What was your bread and butter?
Two large clients came along, both in advertising all at once, which was crazy. It was Publicis and WPP. And we've done a lot in advertising as partly as a result of that, but and I was effectively the GC to this WPP business for
What were you
a
doing for
decade.
them?
All sorts of stuff. I mean, dude, the way this stuff happens is crazy. I mean, in New York, you got to be in it to win it, right? So I wanted to lower expenses, and I had a mentor, and he said, no, you need to keep the office. You need to have an assistant. You can't be doing all the paperwork yourself. You've got to get out there and do what you need to do. So I'm standing in the elevator of my office building, worrying about rent and the overhead and everything else, holding my kilt, as we in Scotland wear kilts sometimes, right? And this English guy goes like, are you Scottish? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, I used to do loads on the whiskey accounts. That's so funny. And he's an English guy from London. And I was like, oh, no way. And he's like, drop me an email. We should go for a beer or something. Because you're a lawyer, right? Blah, blah, blah. And we managed to strike up a rapport. And these guys were amazing clients for the best part of a decade, right? And they didn't have an in-house counsel. And they kind of used me for that. And literally an elevator pitch, right?
Wow. So that was
What was I doing for them? It was all sorts. To be fair, and I'm conscious of your time here because there's so much
yeah,
to talk about. But
yeah.
when I didn't get the green card from the old firm, they were actually pretty cool. About a month later, they said, "Look, you're launching your own firm. We understand. Why don't you keep your office here?" They kind of incubated me before that was even a term, I think, that was being used in the market. And so they said, we won't charge you rent for about 3 months, then we'll charge you a low rent, and then we'll help you out on your matters, right? And they had 25 lawyers. They did kind of everything. They did not everything, not IPOs or anything, but corporate litigation. You can imagine real estate, all the
Okay.
basic built. Yeah.
Tell me, I'm going to stick on the sliding doors theme. Tell me, can you think of from 2007 to, it's crazy to say 2025, or we're a couple of years older, because I started Lawline in 2006, 2007. So it's the same
All right.
exact time frame.
Right. And you kicked ass.
It was my dad had originally started in 99 and then dissolved the company 2 years later. That was my second year of law school. And it was me and an intern. And I think it was like $1,000 a month that it was bringing in. And then I invested all my time into it. And then the first month after I graduated, we made like $30,000 in a month. And I was, oh no, maybe it was 10,000. And I just thought it was the most money in the world. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Totally.
And so, and one of the reasons I went to law school was I was in 5 sales jobs, and I didn't want to keep going sales job to sales job to sales job. I wanted to have a career for 20 years. And next year, 2026 is when 2006, when I graduated law school, that'll be 20 years. So I'm like, okay, this is actually not what I anticipated, but even better. And so now looking to you about what you anticipated even better, can you think of other stories like the phone call to the school or meeting your wife that were sliding door moments?
I'm trying to think of some. I not necessarily a moment in time, but some of the lucky things that happened to me as I was just explaining. The old firm were like, well, why don't you just stick around, right? So I always sold a pretty broad. I never went out into the market and said, I'm an employment lawyer, right? I said, I have a firm and we can help you with this, this, and this, and this, right? Always believing we could, and it was all in good faith, right? So I decided they basically gave me this broad offering, which allowed me to build a firm, I think, faster. And what I ended up doing was replacing them ultimately with my own people and those are the people we now have today. I wish I could think of a better slide.
Well, let me don't I put you on the spot, so we'll shift gears, and if anything pops into your head, because to me it goes to the. And let me just say this: I actually believe in this component right now. We're talking about the icing on the cake for this podcast, because what you shared from the emotional standpoint, from what actually you did, how you got here, and even how you started the firm, that's an amazing story. and I'm actually thinking about ending the podcast, because we don't need to go through your whole resume to actually have an impact on somebody else. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask, let's just fast forward to today for a second. And because we started, you have 12 attorneys, you have 3 staff. How have you evolved when you look back to the young attorney trying to get a visa in 2007? Tell me about that story looking backwards.
I think there's good and bad in it, right? It's a development arc, and I don't think it's necessarily. We probably talk about this, but it's not like this, right? I think there's more step ups sometimes, and I think, kind of to your point about Lawline in the early days when that 30 grand came in, you're like dancing a jig. Same with me, right? Had 50 grand matter or something. I'm like, oh my God, that's more money than I could even think of, right? I think one of the good and bad is 15 years later, when you've got a payroll of several $1 million and you have to keep people busy, and you get like a 200 grand matter, you're like, bang, great, on to the next one. Not as much celebration, not as much taking the time to celebrate your success, right? And I think that's a kind of a to and a fro of the cycle. And I think I've not really changed that much. I've gotten better at certain things. I try and keep my energy up. I try and keep my openness to conversations like this and other conversations.
Well, let me. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm going to interrupt you. Actually, I'm going to interrupt you because there's another side, and this is what you talked about with Joe as well, and what me and you talk about, and we can, I guess, relate to each other, is how we want to spend time with our family and our children, whether it's travel, whether it's being there at night when they're younger to tuck them in, and it's making decisions to not be focused on work and be focused on family, knowing you're leaving opportunities probably behind.
I absolutely, I definitely got something to say on that, as do you, and we're both family.
I want to hear what you have to say, because you've done really well.
We both value it very, very highly, I would say. Even though, we've all got hustle, we're all driven for success, but the kids grow up quick. And, I take my 2 trips nobody told me you should go to London, but I realized I got to go to London. So I go 2 or 3 times a year. I go in on a Sunday night into Monday, come back on a Friday, don't miss the weekend. In Brooklyn, I had a rule trying to be out just one night. I didn't do bedtime. Didn't always make it to that, but I definitely have left money on the table in a way, but who cares, right? You can't take it with you. You know what I mean? These, as you said, you've got a couple almost in college. My guy will be there in a blink. My oldest, I've got 4 boys, and I don't want to miss that. And there's plenty of time to bill hours or do what the hell I want to do in 10 years when they don't need me or they're not interested in talking to me.
One of the things that's been most important to me in my life is having agency over my time. And, not everybody can have it all the time, right? You have to do certain things. But when it comes to being with our kids and traveling, and I was an expat for a couple of years, right? Living in Barcelona. You've been doing it for a long time. Do you think about that as well in terms of, well, let's look to, okay, we've just gone through almost 20 years. When you look to another 10 years from now, do you have any other sort of visions or plans that you want to do? Or is it at this stage where you're like, I'm just going to keep doing it, got lots of college to pay for, got lots of different things? Or is there somewhere where you see, okay, when I look back in 10, 15 years, this is what I want my life to look like? And I'll just be honest, from my point of view, that's something I'm still working on, because a lot of what I've wanted to achieve, I've achieved in a good and bad way. And so I'm trying to work that out myself.
Well, we're a similar age, right? luckily we've had a bit of success, right? And I've absolutely been wrestling with that over the last year or two, partly because in 23 we had a very poor year, and we weren't alone. It was just a bad year. Investment was down, all this kind of stuff. But it's quite sobering when you've got a lot of kids, college, as you say, living in the Northeast in a nice way is not cheap. So you've got that kind of pressure you put on yourself in a way. And I'm thinking to myself, look, this has been pretty good. Does the next 15 years of my career, which might be all I have left, look exactly like the last? And from a learning and challenge perspective, am I okay with that? And I think some friends would or peers would say, "You're crazy. You got it made in the shade. You're always with your family. You make a good living." And other people are like, "Well, you went to a big law firm and this platform, and you could drive this into this." And maybe that's true. I actually think what I'm going to focus on is doing what I've always been doing. And I'd like to think about a possible journey of roll-ups where I can grow the firm through merger, possibly retiring attorneys. There's still no outside money in law in New York, right? The PE is yet to arrive. It will come probably. But my journey could be an acquisition journey, I think, which I think would just be, I think I'm probably like a lot of us entrepreneurs, like I need to be challenged, right? I want to try something different and figure it out. But I don't know that I'm in a position to just shut the doors and start a legal tech business, right? I'd like to do those things on the side.
You know, when you say all that, the question that's like people generally ask, are my best days in front of me or behind me? And I would hate to, I don't think ever admit to myself that my best days are behind me. With that said, your actions need to lead to believing. You can't just say that I hope they're in front of me. You need to like know that you're taking
No,
those actions.
I think you have to be. I think you have to be definitive. You have to be taking action. You have to be thinking about it. And we're not perfect, right? But we were away skiing last week, and I had two or three really good ideas on the mountain. And I do think that travel, giving you distance and perspectives from a sort of quote unquote daily grind, is really good. It doesn't. It's happenstance when I do it, but like and I've not had the amazing experience you had of going to Barcelona, and I live as an expat, but I'm pretty American these days too, and it's been well over half my life living here. But I think it's not uncommon for folks our age to have this introspective thought, I think, and it's any person with any intellectual ability would be like, well, what is next? What is going to keep me interested?
It's a cross between two things. Midlife rut. I don't like midlife crisis, where you've been doing the same things for a while. And so, and then it's in a good way, like in your situation, it's a good way. But you don't necessarily feel as challenged as you want to feel, or not, or you're very challenged, but not in the areas you want to be, or the story that you've had in your head, maybe since you were 20 or 25 hasn't come to fruition. Does that resonate with you at all?
I don't know. Life's not a journey; it's a destination, David. Right? Isn't that what they say?
No, the other way.
Oh, wait. Sorry, it's a destination, not a journey. It's not a destination.
It's the journey. It's the journey, not the destination.
Absolutely, the journey. And I'm just kidding. And I think we are. Again, go back to John Lennon, right? The best laid. What is it? The best laid. That's Robert Burns. Sorry, but Lennon said, "Life's what's happening when you're busy making other plans."
Yeah.
And I think if you're constantly keep your eyes open, ready for challenges, ready to hustle and put in the work, it was pretty sobering to have a bad year 2 years ago because it had been a while and it was a gut punch, but it was kind of good in a way because it kind of woke me up from not a malaise, but I was like, I was like, what will drive the business forward? What should I be pivoting into this? Should I be thinking of a new journey? And also, yes, if you went to a larger platform law firm, you might get some guaranteed base for a year or two, but no one's keeping you around at those numbers if you're not performing. The pressure would never go away.
I can tell you this, I've spoken to many people who sold their business and for a lot of money who didn't have a plan afterwards in different forms. They're all struggling with loss of community, loss of focus, loss of something that they're building and not sure where to go. And it's just a recognition for us and everybody who is at their job and is struggling in some form or is an entrepreneur and is struggling in some form. It is it really is that journey where if you just take a moment and pause, like we are exactly where we want to be in terms of all to me, I feel like I'm a kid in college. I was actually sharing this at a meeting today. We were talking about with the entire company. What I love about Lawline is I feel like we're always just working on a school project and that we're trying to experiment to see if we can get it to success. And if we can't, then we go on to the next one. And that's what keeps me going. I don't know if it translates to a law firm as much as to a legal tech company, because there's obviously, when you're dealing with clients and you're helping them move to the country and making sure everything's done correctly, you want to make sure
everything you do, and plenty of our work is domestic as well. It's not all this inbound stuff, as I said, but it's very. I really enjoy it. If I didn't, and I think I could empathize with an entrepreneur who sells and suddenly has nothing to do, right? And maybe golf is enough to content them, but I think most builders, most people with active minds are like they kind of need something. And I do my emails in the morning. It doesn't feel like work to me. Like it's just what I do.
What do you do in the morning?
My emails or whatever. I wake up.
Yeah.
I often wake up to quite a lot of backlogged email because it's Europe, obviously.
Right.
So I'll deal with that over a coffee, whatever. And it just it's never really felt like work.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate this conversation, and what I love about the way we start, I never know where it's going to go. And we could have talked about marketing. We could have talked about building a firm. But what I think was really powerful was your origin story of how you came to America, how you started your firm, and then the open and transparent area of where you are very successful, even having a bad year. What does the next 15 to 20 years look like? And the message is, let's see, let's all see, and let's do the progress. So I appreciate you sharing all that. And you, even though we haven't spoken in a while, you being open to doing it on a podcast, because maybe someday your kids or one of your kids will watch this and be very impressed and to see what you've done and enjoy it.
Hey, I got 4 boys. Someone must be a lawyer, right?
Awesome.
David, it's a pleasure, buddy. Good to see you.
Thank you, Allan.
All right. Cheers.